the people that we work with, the brands that we carry, like who we surround ourselves with defines who we are.
So I like a lot of things. I like coffee in the morning. I would never turn down a piece of dark chocolate. And I also love chatting with people. So that's why I started Strange Currencies. This gives me a chance to sit down with all of these great people that I've met in the marketing and advertising space, ask them some questions about their business and their life, and learn a few things along the way. Hope you enjoy it. Grab a cup of coffee and let's go. Hey, I'm here with Ben O'Meara. Super excited. We got to meet each other last week when I was in Austin, and he's part of the company that continues to take more and more space up in my closet, Huckberry. He's the chief brand officer, and this is going to be just a really fun conversation. So super excited to ask you a bunch of questions and see where it goes. So thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. It was great to finally meet in person.
It was fun.
We had last week. We've known each other so long digitally, and our companies working together. So it was great to finally connect the dots.
Right? Like that could be a whole other podcast, the whole problem with how relationships now are built over digital. So tell me a little bit, like, how did you start at Huckberry? I read that you started at Life is Good, which is so funny. That was like a go-to brand for me when I was raising my kids at the beach in Ocean City. They had this big store there, and we used to go all the time. So looks like you came from there in Massachusetts, right? And then you ended up in Austin. How'd that happen?
Sort of the mid elevator pitch. I grew up in Maine. And then went to college in North Carolina. I started out in an advertising agency back in Portland, Maine, right out of college. Great agency.
Which one?
Called Via Agency.
No, didn't
know. A boutique agency. We did a bunch of national clients, still around, doing great work. And then, was it Life is Good when I met Andy and Rich, the founders of Huckberry. I had no idea what Huckberry was. This was when I met the two of them. I think they were 2 years into the business, maybe. Very small. I happened to meet them through a relationship. I happened to be with a mutual friend of Andy's, one of the founders. The week before, I was going out to San Francisco to meet my now wife. We were doing the bi-coastal. We were about to have that conversation of like, one of us needs to move. I was in Boston. I was happy in Boston. I wanted her to move back. Anyways, long story short, I met Andy for a coffee. Wasn't an interview. They didn't have an office. We met in a grocery store in the Mission.
Oh, that's funny.
And a coffee turned into an hour-long conversation, which turned into, I guess, we were very, very small at that point. There were no formal HR processes, but turned into an interview, so to say. And this was on a Friday morning after taking a red eye to San Francisco. And by Monday on my flight back to Boston, I had a handshake deal with Andy and Rich that I was going to move out and join them at Huckberry.
Your wife worked out there, or she wasn't your wife yet, right? But she worked out in the San Francisco area, right? What does she do?
She has always worked in nonprofit fundraising development. She's currently running the partnerships and foundation for the business school here at UT.
Nice.
So we actually met at Life is Good. Life is Good has a big foundation arm to the company.
Okay.
And so she and I were working together on our nonprofit initiatives. We did a big music festival. So we worked with Superfly, who does Bonnaroo and Outside Lands. We put on a big music festival, which is our fundraiser / like community marketing tentpole event. I was doing partnerships. She was doing fundraising. So we met there. Then she went out to San Francisco to chase a dream of living on the West Coast. And we joke, but there's some serious to it. Like Huckberry saved our relationship because, as you can imagine, going Boston to San Francisco, especially when we were making no money, was a very hard thing to do. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, I moved out to San Francisco with a backpack and a duffel bag, and I moved into a house with 3 women and my wife. And luckily by that point, Huckberry just moved into their first real office, which was in the basement of another building. But it was a very fun time in life. It was like a real adventure. I candidly, like when I was telling people I'm moving to San Francisco, and they're like, for what? And again, Huckberry was very small at that time. No one had heard about it. I remember telling people jokingly, but also like part serious. I didn't want to admit this. Like, there's a chance I'm moving back here in a year because this isn't working out.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I'm chasing the dream. I'm doing the Steve Jobs. I'm going to go work in a garage in San Francisco.
But do you feel like when you first did it, was it like half to take the job and half also to be near your future wife? How much did that weigh in, do you think? Or did you just have a good feeling about the opportunity?
I was really lucky that it was like definitely more lean, especially my wife will listen to this, and this is true. Definitely closer to my wife. But I was incredibly excited about the opportunity. Like it really was a win-win. I had no desire to really move to. I love San Francisco. I'd spent time there as a kid, but I had no desire to move now back across the country after I just settled in Boston.
Yeah.
But the combination of obviously wanting this relationship to work, but like the vision that Andy and Rich really sold me on, it got me so excited. So I am incredibly grateful still to this day that it was a really easy decision on both fronts.
You've been there 10 years, right? The vision that they laid out for you, was it almost 10 years? I think I saw
I'm
that
going
on
into
LinkedIn.
12.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
going into
I'm going
12.
into
All
my
right.
12th year. Yeah.
I thought I saw 10. So 12, that's even better.
Yeah.
When they laid out the vision for you, like how much has it changed from that point till now? Obviously, first of all, you had to move to Austin. But
Yeah.
second, like how much has the company really changed? I would say that for me, the company really has just, I mean, I've been working with you guys for so long that, fundamentally it's the same company, but you guys do so much more now, which is so cool. But I wonder how it is I don't know if that has a lot to do with you, but it would be really interesting to hear kind of how it's changed.
And I think it's one of the things that keeps me so inspired 12 years later. And what I'm really grateful for is like that vision and foundation is exactly the same in many forms. Like back then, when Andy and Rich were telling me about the idea of Huckberry, the origin of Huckberry, the business strategy that they saw, the potential in the market. Obviously, our business has grown exponentially since then. And so we're doing more, to your point. Our business is more complicated. We're playing in new places that maybe we didn't think we could play into way back then. When you think about that sort of core foundation of, again, like what Andy and Rich founded the business on, this place, this not just marketplace, not just retailer, but content engine, storytelling, combining these worlds of outdoor, but also the appreciation of like city and culture. Those are still like the foundations. Those are still the lenses, especially from a brand side, that we look through every single day. Now, to your point, there's a lot more complexity to that. But I think that's one of the superpowers of Huckberry is there was this very distinct, very specific vision
Yeah.
of both on a business standpoint, opportunity in the market, but then from like a brand identity standpoint, the type of business that Andy and Rich wanted, the type of opportunity that they saw in like individuals around them. And that still is what sort of drives our decision making today.
Everything I ever see from Huckberry, the first thing I always think to myself is no matter what it is, whether it's like a new launch of a brand or it's new content like Dirt, which was just such a great show, or anything else, I truly do. I always say to myself, shit, man, they're just always on point. Like it never feels out of place. It always, like I probably would have some pretty decent success seeing something and not knowing it was Huckberry and saying that's probably Huckberry. And that's like a great thing, right? We try to do that. We try to do that on a smaller level with what we do. Whereas if you would see one of our newsletters, you would be like, that's a Rotary newsletter. But I love that about you guys. Like I always, every time I see something new, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that's Huckberry. Like you just know, which is really cool. Yeah, it's awesome. I thought this would be a fun question, like for my kids or for anybody else. Like, can you give like a sense of like, what is the job of a chief brand officer? Like if you were explain it to my son as a junior in college, who's like trying to figure out what he's going to do next, like how do you explain that job? What's your workday like? That kind of stuff.
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Depends on the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll start with not the easiest, but the most straightforward tactical side of the business. So I oversee our brand marketing team. I oversee our creative team. I oversee our media and editorial. So from a tactical standpoint, those are sort of the umbrellas that I oversee. I'm also very involved in the product side of the business, from collaborations to the types of brands that we're bringing on. Obviously, like the storytelling and the marketing strategy for those brands, but also like what products can Huckberry uniquely speak to or make based on what we're seeing from brand, consumer, other sort of trends in the marketplace. So I think my sort of overarching responsibility is like I connect dots between our customer, like Andy and Rich's brand vision, what our product team needs, and then making sure that like the lens that we are looking through when we're making decisions on a creative concept, on a new show, is taking into consideration all of those factors and prioritizing like the purpose of the creative, of the campaign, of the content. So that sort of holistic view of the brand, all of the different pieces. I look at a brand as like a living person. It obviously evolves every year, but there is this like consistent foundation that you always need to have. And so like it is my job to sort of protect that foundation, but also evolve how that foundation is interpreted in all these various touch points that then the customer sees and relates to and hopefully reacts to in a positive form.
Are you almost like a manager or coach for this team, and then you make sure that everybody, whatever they're doing, is like they make sure that it stays within the vision, right? Make sure it stays within what the brand wants it to be, sort of as a way to sort of guide them?
I would say that that's where a lot of my role has evolved to when you think about the day to day.
Yeah.
I am so fortunate that we have such an incredible team of talented individuals, creative strategists, production, all of these different pieces that all come together to make what customers see, whether it's a campaign, a piece of content, really feel like Huckberry, as you expressed.
Yeah.
We're still a small and scrappy team, so I still have my hands dirty, and I'm still driving certain briefs, and there's certain content shows that I myself are hosting and developing. But so much of my time behind the scenes now is making sure that teams are aligned on the goals, teams have clear direction,
Yeah.
but then also teams have like the freedom to do what they do best.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, I mean, the sports, and you and I are big sports guys. We talked a lot when we were here, like a player coach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it seems like. That's right. Yeah, that's a great analogy. So yesterday, I truly, like, again, I don't do this just because we're on this. I truly love dirt. Like I always say, I'm 56, right? I've had a pretty good life. I do a lot of good stuff. And then I watch an episode of Dirt with Josh and I'm like, fuck, like I need to do more with my life. You know what I mean? He just gives that vibe in everything we do. So how involved are you with Dirt? I saw you in the Texas episode. I don't know if that's just because you were there, but I would love to know. I mean, certainly from a brand standpoint, your fingerprints are all over it, but like how involved do you get in the show?
So Kate is our executive producer, and she and Josh really created this show, and sort of myself and Andy were behind the scenes and providing input and sort of some of the strategy that led to the development of it. I'm involved in every episode in some capacity. So I work with Kate on storyboarding the year. Where are the places that we want to feature, and we take into consideration where do we have great customer density? Where does our brand show up? What are our customers interested in? Where are places that they want to discover themselves? We now have sponsors that are coming in that want us to go showcase a particular region of the world. So I'm very involved on the strategy of Dirt. And then when it comes to the actual storyboarding, the actual creative, that's where like I step back. Kate and her team are experts. I, of course, will give feedback here and there, like make sure that we get, this type of scene in there or this type of product integration. So I'm working on sort of the cadence, how Dirt is really used in the calendar, like where we're doing them. We strategically try to launch Dirts at various points in the season, whether it's reinforcing a larger brand message or it's dropping in sort of a lull in consumer peaks where we need to bring some heat to Huckberry. So it's Kate and I and Andy and Josh at the very beginning of Dirt.
Yeah.
And then today, it obviously has become this entity and property that takes a ton of hard work. I don't want to say it runs itself, but it's one of those things where when Kate and the rest of our internal team have an idea, it's my job to make sure that they get what they need and that it's launched effectively.
Yeah. Was it Josh's idea? Did he bring it to you?
It was one of those like as many great ideas happen. It happened over the course of multiple conversations and building a relationship with Josh. Kate, again, who I mentioned is the executive producer and creative director of Dirt. She used to run our campaign production team, and we actually used Josh for a photo shoot. So that was the sort of first connection. And then post shoot, everyone's having beers, having dinner after a long day. And we're talking about some of our goals and expanding our media efforts. And Josh had this passion for this type of content. We had an idea and sort of we blended the two. And so it really was like Kate and Josh with, like I said, a little bit of influence from Andy and I.
Yeah, that's really cool. They do such a good job. So you would say like in the example of, so first of all, any kind of product placement that's in the show, super organic. I never, even me being in this space all my life, I never look and was like, oh, they tried too hard there. Like it's very sort of seamless, which I know is the intention. But is that the example like in the Texas episode? So for those that are listening, you just have to watch the show. It's called Dirt, and this was the Texas episode. You guys visited the Flint and Tinder factory. So
Yep.
is that intentional, right? Like, are you
Yes.
trying, because that's your brand, right? So you're trying
Totally.
to, which was really cool, by the way, because I'm wearing Flint and Tinder jeans,
I
and
love it.
to see like how they're made. I mean, that was just like, that was really cool. I had no idea how
Yeah.
it was done. So I would assume, right, that's sort of, that was intentional for the episode.
It's intentional on two fronts, and that's the beauty of like how we go about Dirt. And again, we want to protect the editorial integrity. The goal of Dirt is to create great content that builds an audience,
Yeah.
right? And then we have a really sophisticated team that you can then monetize that audience through a variety of different ways. Of course, like in the end, Huckberry, like it's sort of the ethos of our product strategy. In the end, we're a retailer, but the storytelling component has been the foundation of Huckberry from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so what we are good at, and I'm biased, but like making sure that when we are selling you a product, like there's a little bit more story and intention behind it. It's not just driven on price and like really important pieces in the consideration window. And I think how we integrate product into Dirt, we come at it first from what's the story and what would be really interesting chapters of the story. And then luckily, because of all the different places that we play, all the different brands that we own and that we carry, like that's the gear that you would be bringing anyways. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
naturally integrates. And
Yeah.
so like the Dirt example that you used, like a lot of people don't know that some of the best jeans in the world are made in El Paso. Like that would be a story I would want to tell even if we weren't making the jeans ourselves in that factory.
Right.
It's one of those discovery elements. And so it was sort of a win-win. And then, as I said, this is a continued evolution of Dirt. Like you have the Dirt episode, but then there's a lot of things that we do after the Dirt launches. We do a cut down of that particular scene of the jeans being made, and that's used on performance marketing. That's used on our PDPs to really reinforce the quality and the story behind the product.
Right.
So we're getting better. There's still a lot more opportunity there to take the natural product integration, but then get more sophisticated and like cut downs and retargeting and all of those really important tactical digital marketing strategies that we've got an incredible team that's already putting additional sort of resources behind.
I love that idea because it's really true. Like when you buy something on Huckberry, it does feel like it has more depth than just the product itself. It feels like it has a story, right? It feels like it has an identity to it, which is great.
Like one thing, like it's one of those internal mantras.
Yeah.
Is like the question that we ask ourselves in any sort of product meeting is like, what's the why behind the buy?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of different factors that come into play. It's not any one singular answer, but we want to have that like distinct point of view of why we made something at this price point, at this quality, this style. Why are we bringing on this brand partner? There has to be a distinct point of view that, again, connects back to that brand promise. What do our customers expect from us? Like, what are the things that we stand for? Does it reinforce, one of our main brand pillars of quality, of discovery?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. It's great. I feel that way all the time when I buy something. I feel like you're just like you're buying more than just the product itself, which is just it's just super cool. Even the small things too that Rich and Andy do, I don't think they realize, but it's very cool that when you buy something from Huckberry, that you get a card from them. I know it's like a small thing, but it's just super cool. It just sort of makes a company that continues to grow and grow feel like it's small, feel like it's very personal. It's a very smart thing. I hope they never stop.
That's something that we can't lose. And again, like that's something that I focus a lot as we continue to scale and get as big as we are is we want to keep it real. We want to, that was the whole idea of Huckberry, was not just a retailer that made shopping easier, but a place that you could connect to, a community that you could learn from, get inspired from. And in the foundation of that is like the relatability that we have as a brand internally.
Brand collaborations and product launches. You have one that you're like, I'm sure you're proud of like a lot of stuff that you've done, but do you have one in particular with a backstory or whatever that you're just like super proud of?
Yeah, there's so many.
I know. So maybe it's a tough question.
One that touches on a variety of different things that relate back to our business strategy, but then also what our brand stands for. And it was a very fun moment in I wouldn't call it like a singular inflection point, but really I think showed us the power of like our business model of like great product point of view, great content and storytelling, and like at the root of all of that, like an incredible community that we can like connect to, both on the sort of receiving end of what we're providing, but also like part of the content, part of the story. And that was, I forget how many years ago at this point it was. It was pre-COVID. I think that's how I now.
Yeah. That's how we all look at life, right?
Look at life.
Man. Jesus.
And we had the opportunity where Coors Banquet came to
Oh
us
yeah.
with an exclusive opportunity to basically for a year take over their licensing. And in true Huckberry form, like we were excited about that, but it's like, how do we put a Huckberry spin on this? Like, there's a lot of just like cool, but it's a very saturated market of like branded merch,
Yeah.
particularly in beer spaces. And so it was a really big opportunity, like a brand as big as Coors with sort of that legacy and such an incredible archive, especially for the design nerds, myself included, of amazing old vintage ads, vintage designs. And so we put together a three-part, and this was really big for us. We had always done like singular product launches, singular collaborations.
Yep.
There was always content involved, but not like a true like media plan and like big video extension of some of these. But we put together a three-part series over the course of the year, and each series was made up of an exclusive drop with a sort of theme from their archives, and then a video that profiled a community member in Huckberry that represented like making adventure more accessible
Mm-hmm.
in different lenses.
Yep.
And so it was a really cool series that connected, again, all the things that Huckberry was built upon were like great product with like fun, unique design with like distinct point of view, and then a flywheel of like really thoughtful in sort of a mini form, but episodic content.
Yep.
And so that was one from like a scale standpoint, scared me. Like, can we do all of this?
Yeah.
But became a case study of like content and commerce and sort of the future of Huckberry.
It's interesting. You feel like it sounds like that played somewhat of a part into what you're doing now with dirt and everything else. Like you sort of
Totally,
figured out.
totally.
Yeah.
We had always been doing like singular videos here and there.
Yeah.
But we know that then, and we know now, like our customers are on YouTube, and that's not some revolutionary insight. Everyone's on YouTube now. But taking a lot of inspiration from media companies and like episodic content is how you actually build an audience. You can create a great film, but it's really expensive and you have to have the right distribution partners to really get eyeballs. But we wanted to build YouTube for us.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is create consistency on that channel. And the easiest way, it's hard, but the easiest way to do that is like episodic content.
Yeah.
Create a brand. People expect and wait for the next episode, like you just described with Dirt. So that was definitely one of those like important data points where let's find a consistent storyline and let's start testing and developing episodic content in addition to doing fun, opportunistic videos that are part of various campaigns, provide heat, provide interesting new ideas. But how do we really at the foundation build an episodic content engine that builds that audience?
YouTube, just like a side question, do you know your customers are on YouTube? Is that what are you finding them and you realize they're on YouTube, or are you finding them on YouTube and they're becoming customers? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that the platform where you're essentially looking for your next customer? You spend most of your time there?
I wouldn't say it's where we spend most of our time, but it's certainly where we're spending the most amount of time in terms of like new business development.
Got it.
We knew that our current customers were on YouTube. Customer surveys, like anecdotal conversations,
Okay.
they were on YouTube. So we knew that we already had, like, even though we didn't have a full-fledged YouTube channel, that they were there. And as long as we communicated that we now have a YouTube channel, them knowing our brand would come and at least build that foundation of our subscriber and audience base. And then obviously taking data, market data of just the total addressable market on YouTube. So it was a combination of those two things. But what gave us conviction to go into it first was we knew that a lot of our current customers were on YouTube, and they were on YouTube looking for things that we do really well. They were looking for like education videos. How do I re-wax my jacket? Like, how do I choose what bag to bring for a 72-hour trip to Europe? And then they were also using it for entertainment. And it's like, all right, like these are things that we're already doing on our journal. Again, I'm oversimplifying. It's much more complex than that. Let's reformat that for video.
Yeah.
Like they're showing us that they like it. We have the data on the content they like on the journal.
Right.
We know that they're on YouTube. Let's connect the dots and start putting more emphasis there.
Do you have any story of a brand where, like a collaboration, a product launch you did, and then you soon realize like, oh man, that just didn't work out, or that was I always say anyway, and I'm telling the truth, I think failures are the best teachers, right? You learn so much from when you fail. So I'm
100%.
sure you have failures, and like you need to, right? So
We fail every week,
yeah,
right?
yeah, right, right,
But I think what's important is like we're calculated, and
yeah,
we go into something knowing like if we fail, these are going to be the implications. We're not going blindly into something.
yeah,
I fully agree. Like Rich has got this great saying that he ingrained in my head on day one that we still reference all the time. It's like you always throw out your first pancake, right? And that
yeah, yeah.
idea,
He said that when he talked to me. That's right. I love that
yeah.
quote. Yeah,
And it's true. Like you do something, you learn from it. Doesn't mean that it's horrible the first time, but it always gets better the second time. As long as
yeah,
you have like the ingredients and sort of the right intention and the right strategy. So coming back to your question, there's certainly been like collaborations and launches that have not hit in the expectation that we had hoped and had wanted and not met the KPIs, did not have the creative that we wanted. That happens a lot, especially
sure.
considering how much we do and how much we're testing. I think one that does come to mind that um, you could define it as sort of a failure in a certain sense based on like how we were defining the campaign. But it was really one of those, to your point, it was a great learning and a great reminder of um, my point earlier of being like really intentional about like the goal of the campaign.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but we did a Father's Day campaign. This was pre-core, so this is way back. Um, and sorry, it wasn't Father's Day. It was April Fool's. And
Oh
we,
wait, I
for
think I
April
remember.
Fools, we had this great idea of like, let's launch for April Fools as a joke, a Huck Baby collection. So, play on the name.
Yeah. Right.
And it made a lot of sense.
Yep.
And so that we started like, this would be a really fun April Fools. Like, let's pretend that we launch Huck Baby.
Yep.
Um, and we had this great concept. We had Alex, our creative director, take his then like 3-year-old daughter out to Yosemite. We had all these different kids doing like Huckberry adventures, but they were like miniature versions.
Yep.
Like the photos are still some of my favorites. What like we ended up doing, we got so excited about this idea that again started as just like an April Fool's joke. We decided to build out a full assortment of kids products. We made like Huck Baby t-shirts. We
Yeah.
brought in a bunch of like kids adventure gear.
Okay.
And so like you hear all of that, and I remember being in that room like, this is going to be so cool. It's going to be so funny here, but then we're going to sell all these kids stuff.
Yeah.
And it was so confusing for our customer. They're like, wait, is this a joke?
Yeah.
Like, can I buy this?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can buy. Like, it just created a lot of customer confusion. It
Yeah.
created a lot of like fun laughs, and people do love it. It didn't hurt our brand, but it was a good lesson in like for me, we got so excited about the creative idea.
Yeah.
And then we just spread the idea far too wide and took like a ton of resources. But in the end, from a customer standpoint, they were like, what's going on here? Is this you're launching it on April Fools, but like our CX team just had a nightmare of like people writing in, like, can I actually buy this stuff?
Yeah.
So it was a good lesson in just like, succinct messaging, and also like you get really excited about an idea. It doesn't mean you have to go super wide, like keep it super focused.
Yeah.
So it was a good one for us to learn from. And also like April Fool's is a fun holiday, but is it a holiday that Huckberry really, really uniquely needs to show up for?
No. Yeah, I get you
Probably
there.
not. Yeah.
Funny though, like it's not your core business, but in hindsight, yeah, maybe it didn't work, but like, did you learn like if we'd done differently and it wasn't confusing, like maybe we could have actually sold the line of Huck Baby stuff?
And we ended up selling a good amount, but
Yeah.
and that was the other really important piece. Like obviously coming at it from like the creative messaging standpoint, but yeah, we could have sold a bunch of kids stuff. But that again, when we think about limited resources and what our brand stands for, that takes away from like providing better products for our core customers.
Yeah.
And like that focus, we've been really good about like focusing. Like we know that eventually we want to go more aggressively into women's. We want like channel expansions, but that campaign was a good example of like us like being very tempted by a short-term pop in revenue opportunity, but like at the cost of not continuing to serve and improve what we're best at.
You kind of been talking about this anyway, but do you have like, can you define something that's like maybe the most rewarding thing about your job that you wouldn't normally think about? Something that would be surprising?
I'm very fortunate. Like a couple times a year, I get to go out and do various adventures, and there's a couple shows that I get to sort of be the face of. And so, my friends in particular think that I'm just like out and about traveling the world, like
Sure.
being on camera. But 90% of the time, I'm in the office, and that was certainly an adjustment starting like doing everything back in the day. But it's become like my favorite part of the business is seeing, like I referenced Kate and her successes with Dirt, our director of content and our show Homes that is taking off,
Yeah.
creative director, our art directors. Like I could spend an hour going down the list of all these different people, but it's the most rewarding seeing our teams flourish,
Sure.
and my teams in particular.
Yeah.
And especially when like I don't like need to be heavily involved, like give them what they need,
Yeah.
but knowing that they really understand the brand, they really understand the strategy, and then they're also making things better. They're becoming like their own experts. I think that was a really like at the time, I think, and it's always an evolution as we grow, but for me, one of the proudest moments is when I have people that become better experts than I am in a
Yeah.
subject that I used to be the expert in.
You put them in a position to literally become better than, or a better version of what you wanted. So that's great. All right, let's like switch gears. Let's talk like personal stuff. If you could master any kind of skill to improve your life, what would it be? That's why I took up painting, and I did take up guitar for a bit, but now it's just painting. That's kind of my thing. But do you have a skill that you either have now or you want to take up? Do you think would, if you had the time?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I mean, the easy answer there from like a business standpoint is really wrapping my hands around AI and the future of that
Yeah.
as it relates to it. But we won't unpack that here.
Yeah. Right.
It's a good question, a skill that I wish I had or that I have that I want to improve upon. For me, like similar to like the painting example for you,
Yeah.
you hear that it's not like a one-to-one to what you're doing professionally,
No.
but I think that's the point.
Yep.
Like one of my passions is music,
Okay.
and
Playing
I've
music or
always
listening to it?
listening to music,
Yeah.
and I've
So,
worked in music, and it's part of our
oh,
community.
okay.
I've always loved, like, I know a lot of people play the guitar and I get it and I love it. I've always wanted to learn the drums. I
All
think
right. Yeah.
like that like foundational beat,
Yeah.
but also like you can get a lot of like
Yeah.
aggression, emotion out and playing the drums.
Yeah.
So that's like I'm always that person who's like tap in, and like I'm gravitated towards music that have a really strong like drum beat. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your
No,
question,
it does.
but
It could be, it may
I've
not
been
be.
thinking a lot about of like a skill that like completely has nothing to do with anything that I'm professionally doing, things that I'm currently doing, obviously on the family side, that I think would just bring me a lot of joy.
Oh yeah, that's it. It's like that's what, and that's a funny moment yesterday. Or actually, when I was watching Dirt, Texas, and to see Josh playing the drums, and I can't remember the guy's name, the piano man that freaked out. He's like, "You can play drums." So
Robert Ellis.
yeah, that was it. But no, that's totally what it is. I mean, painting for me started. I don't know. My mother was a painter up until she passed away. It's a pretty cool story. She had a troubled life, and so we won't get into the details of that. But her hands would shake a lot, and then she would paint watercolors. And the minute she put the brush in her hand, it would get super tight. Like it was the weirdest thing. Like it was something that just because she did it her whole life. Anyway, I sort of knew I had sort of the whatever you want to call it. Like she tapped me on the shoulder and said, you could be an artist. But the reason I do it is it's just something I do every day for an hour or two, just like completely disengages me from my regular job. And a lot of the times, which will happen to you one day if you ever take up drums, is some of your best ideas will wind up coming to you as you're just banging away on those drums. And that's the whole cool thing. So I don't,
exactly.
And you would do it. I have a feeling, Ben, you'd be just like me. You're not doing it to be a drummer or a professional drummer. You're doing it for the joy of it. Same as painting. I'm not doing it to be an artist, but that's kind of the best thing. So you just have something to like pull you away for an hour from all the other things that you normally do. It's actually a great thing. So I hope you do it.
It's one of my goals this year is I've got luckily a couple friends that play drums in bands.
Okay.
And, to just like do a drum lesson, start with one, and go from there. But
when I learned, I was going to tell you, when I learned guitar and I stopped, I always remember this too. I walked into guitar lessons and the guy, he was a metalhead. He was like the greatest guy, but he wanted to teach me scales. And I was like, no, man, like,
teach me a Black Keys song. That's it. All right. And then I'll learn another Black Keys song. And if somehow
Yeah.
along the way I learn how to play guitar, like that's fine. But I didn't want to learn.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would
Right.
be. I didn't want to learn like the sort of
The same.
the
I want to
history.
start with a song.
I just want to start with a
Yeah.
song and like get the thrill out of playing a song, even if it's even for you. Like my songs were just they were like 2 chords, and I was like, oh my god, I'm a guitar player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Are those your paintings behind you?
Yeah, I got a bunch of them. I have a show that I have to do on Monday at this coffee shop at the beach. I got to put up about 15 paintings. So I don't
Amazing.
really know. People always ask like what I like. Like I like this artist Paul Wright. He's like he brushes in really broad strokes, and he's like this amazing artist from London. And I've always liked rock poster art. Like I get totally just. I'm sure you must love it too. Like. When I see rock posters, it like, I don't know what it is. It's just the coolest thing ever. So that and graffiti and music. And I feel like I'm trying to figure out how to make all of that into some kind of soup that I can eat. I don't know what it is yet, but like, that's what I've been trying to do, but it's been fun. But I always say, it's like one of my favorite quotes from Quentin Tarantino. He like, people always ask him, he's like, hell yeah, I steal. All of my scenes are stolen from every other movie made. You don't pay homage, you steal. And that's like what I do.
Like an artist.
You
one of the books that influenced me most.
Yeah, I have that book. Yep. Yeah, that guy's great. I think he might be from Texas, isn't he? Steal like an. It's.
I'm not sure I should know that.
No, we should know that. I feel like because he has a blog too. Oh crap, I can't remember his name, but I know who you mean, right? I have that same book, and it's great. So yeah. So it's really fun. So anyway, I hope you get to do that. That's super cool.
Yeah, the other one on that list that is I think something that I'm pretty good at that I want to do more personally because I do it a lot here at Huckberry is writing. I come
nice.
from my great grandfather was a newspaper editor. My mom was a journalist. My dad owned an advertising agency. So I come from a family of particularly like the written word and storytellers. Yeah. And like I just have so many things in my head, like just outside of Huckberry that I just want to put down on paper. And
have you done it yet? Even in just like any form, just dumping writing or anything?
Not personally. Like every couple times a year, I'll write something for the journal, which is always really fun. Yeah. Or I'll write their emails that I will actually write that come from Huckberry.
Okay.
So I get to flex it now and then, but it's definitely one of my goals this year to be a little bit more intentional.
Nice.
I love like obviously the world that you're in. I'm inspired by a lot of friends and their Substacks.
Yeah.
And so like that's something I've been thinking about is, even for my own, I'm not looking to monetize and create some giant audience, but how do I first and foremost get some ideas out of my head, things that I'm passionate about, like similar to what we're doing here. I'm so lucky to be surrounded by so many interesting people.
Yeah, me too.
And I often get to work with them in Huckberry, but there's also things that I want to talk about that, are related but completely different. So what's an outlet where I can like double click into like all these amazing ingredients that I get exposed to pretty regularly?
Yeah, your writer John, who I met when I was there, like he has a Substack. It's great. I love what he's doing. Totally. And it seems like the same thing, right? It's like a little bit of that, like what he does, but then he said he takes it in a real fun direction. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Totally.
Oh, there you go. Drums and a Substack. I'm going to have to check back in like 6 months.
Let's check back in January next year.
Yeah, see how you did. I have this one thing I was going to ask you, like ever like a great quote that has sort of set a foundation for you in terms of your like personal development. Like my favorite is I was always told thoughts are just thoughts, let them go and don't let them take roots. Like I always remember that because it's a great thing that I try to instill in my kids too, this whole idea that like you can just let them go. Do you have a great quote or anything that you sort of inspires you?
Yeah, there's one that I often share here, and I've shared a few times in some Huckberry media. And there's a variety of different interpretations and variations of this quote, but it actually came from my mom when I was a little kid. And it was, you are who you hang with, right? And it's like your friends are a foundation of who you are. But her exact words were, and it was at a time where I was hanging out with like the troublemakers in middle school.
Yeah.
She's like, you are who you hang with. Like perception is reality, right?
Yeah.
And so that can be interpreted in so many different ways, and something that I hold dear, especially now when I think about like our brand. We are who we hang with.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
People that we work with, the brands that we carry, like who we surround ourselves with defines who we are, like from a perception standpoint, but also like their influences.
Yeah.
And then like personally, it's something like, as we were talking about and you alluded to, like I'm at a stage where I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old. world, right? My time is very limited. Very busy, exciting world of Huckberry. And so just being really intentional to like nurture the relationships first and foremost. So the people that like fill my cup, kind
Yeah.
of with my family, friends, Huckberry community. But then also like being really honest with myself of like how much I can take in and not overextending myself.
Yeah.
And so, what's the other sort of, it's not a quote, but like you are a summation of like the 5 people you spend the most amount of time
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's right.
that's something I think a lot about now is I think about like limited time, like making sure I'm protecting time with my family, but also making sure like there's personal and professional growth. So you are who you hang with, and variations of that is like core professionally and core personally.
Yeah.
And
That's a
has
great
been
one.
since my mom pulled me aside and gave me a stern talking to when I was 12 years old.
That's so awesome too that you remember that. That's a great quote.
Yeah.
I love that. How about something that you've done recently that took you out of your comfort zone? Although, of course, you could say last weekend because we talked about that with your race in Big Bend. Does that come to mind, or is there anything that you've done while you've been there or during this time that's really sort of taken you out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like that's probably the easy answer because
Yeah.
it's the most recent.
Yeah.
But like that one took me out of my comfort zone in a variety of fronts.
Yeah.
Doing my first trail race, I run regularly, not long distances, not for speed, but doing 13 miles in the desert in a real race was
That's
something that
serious, huh?
especially
Yeah.
and so it took me out of my comfort zone from a like physical standpoint. But there's also apprehensions when you go into a new community, right? And you
Yeah.
go to like I wasn't running an ultra race, but it was like the Big Bend Ultra, and so you do have this perception of like these are going to be serious athletes, and I'm going to come in and run this slow time, and people are going to be like, who the hell is this guy? And it couldn't be further from the truth. And
Right.
and I kind of knew that like running many different community races on the road, but it definitely gave me a little bit of anxiety on the length and like, can I fit into this community?
Yeah.
So that was one, and it was an amazing experience and did better than I thought, and has motivated me to like actually train and start doing that more.
Yeah. I would tell you, it's funny. I think that because you said you get into this community and you thought you might be intimidated by it, and they were really welcoming. So something I've done over the last 2 months is I started doing CrossFit, and I never did it before because I always assumed that people in CrossFit were these just like young, super jacked people, and that it wouldn't work. But I finally decided I would try it, and I go right. And we have a series of exercises we do, and then they abbreviate them for me. But the thing I found, just like you, that's most surprising is like people there are so welcoming. They're almost like they just think it's great that I'm there at my age and then I'm doing CrossFit. So it's the same kind of idea. And as a result of that, now I really like doing it. Where I think if I had gone and they sort of like brushed me off, I probably would have stopped. So it's great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Let's see. You like what are give me a couple of your daily habits. Like I'll give you an example for me. Like coffee first thing in the morning. I also when I run my business, I have this thing that I used to do, which is I still do it. I use a clicker. I had this story. There's this great story from James Clear one time, which was about this guy who wanted to get into investments, and he wanted to make outreach calls. So he had what he called a paperclip method. He put 25 paper clips in one jar, and then he would make a call and put one paper clip in the next jar, and he'd fill it up to 25 and stop. And then he eventually accrued into a really successful business. So I apply that same idea through a clicker. Do you have like daily habits that are really foundations for you?
Yeah. I mean, exercise. I know that's an easy one, but like I'm religious about waking up really early and exercising first thing, and sort of two reasons for that. Like one, I want to make sure that when my kids are awake, I get to have breakfast with them.
Yeah.
So getting up before they get up, maximize my time with them, and also like I just like the endorphins. Like I think so much clearer and so much better when I exercise. So,
I agree.
I have a variety of different things that I do to like keep. I have a little home gym. I'll do classes. I'll go for runs. But every morning, and like even if it's only 20 minutes, like I'm religious about just like movement.
Yeah.
And I'll do that first. Like I'll drink a big glass of water and then go work out. And then like coffee with my kids is the reward.
Nice.
The other thing that I've started to do a little bit more intentionally, before I work out. I get up at like 5 most days, and it takes me a little while. Like I'm not one that can immediately jump into movement. But I'll go downstairs and I'll, like I said, chug a glass of water, and I'll kind of sit there in silence in the dark and
Nice.
just kind of like enjoy the silence and embrace the silence. I'm one that like needs and wants like stimulation,
Yeah.
but and have been sort of afraid of silence in a sense,
Yeah.
but have been really intentional about just like sitting down and like not like whatever comes into my mind, sort of embrace it. So just like, a form of meditation, if you will.
Yeah, no, I totally
But
get it. It's smart.
one chair, I don't turn the lights on, I chug
Right.
my water, I sit down, and then I'll go and I'll put on my AirPods. After 5 minutes, I'll like turn on a song that will start waking me up, and then I'll go into the gym or go into my workout.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great habit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about 5 minutes or so where you're just like about 5 minutes. Yeah, it's great. That's a really good idea. Those are good. All right, I got one last question. You have any favorite recent books, podcasts, or shows?
Yeah, a book that I'm reading right now, Emotion by Design.
Okay.
It's by Greg Hoffman, who was the former CMO of Nike. It's sort of the heyday of Nike.
Yeah.
I, like many others, was such a Nike head as a kid, growing up with Jordan and sort of the heyday of that. I was big into basketball. I was obsessed. Like that was the first brand that I really fell in love with, not just from a product standpoint, but they helped create like so much of what we think about in terms of like emotional connection, standing for something, really amazing, creative and cool product.
Totally.
And I've always and will always continue to root for Nike. I'm on an amazing Sandlot baseball team here in Austin.
Oh, I know. You talked about it because you and Bob, right? Is it Bob?
Yeah, Bob's on it.
Yeah.
And it was actually founded by the now new CEO of Nike, Elliott Hill.
Yeah.
Who
That's awesome.
has been an incredible friend and resource to me since I met him 4 or 5 years ago when I moved to Austin. So now I have even more of a personal investment in the resurgence of Nike. So anyways, long-winded way of coming back to reading that book, which is about like creativity and leadership and the importance of like how you can't create creativity in a sense, but you have to create an environment that nurtures it.
Yeah.
And gives people freedom to like test and push the boundaries, and like how do you again create like a framework to facilitate that, and then just the overall importance of creativity in terms of a brand identity and its connection to consumers.
Yeah.
So that's the book I'm reading right now. I've been on, candidly, and I'd love any recommendations that you have, a little bit of a podcast rut. And I think part of it's just I'm like fatigued by how many choices there are. I have been on like runs, just going back to like sports podcasts. I always have this, I put this pressure on myself that, okay, I have an hour and I'm going to listen to a podcast. It should be something that's like business development, leadership. I should learn something in this hour. And it just got overwhelming. And similar to that idea of like the drums and painting, actually what I need is just to like turn my brain off for an hour and let it reset. And listening to like Bill Simmons or Dan Patrick. Actually been great for me. Like I love sports. I don't get to watch them nearly as much as I want, but it's also just a great, like it's light, it's easy, and my brain can kind of disconnect from everything else going on.
I don't know what it is for me, but I hear you. And my problem, although you can appreciate this, is that I don't listen to enough podcasts because I like music so much. So like when I go on a run, I'm like, shit, it's a chance for me to like listen to new music. And I'm doing a fun thing right now, which I bet you would like. So when I paint every day, I have this book called 1001 Albums That You Need to Listen to Before You Die. And they're all albums from the 60s all the way into like 2010s. And so I will go through and I'll pick an album, and that's what I'll listen to while I'm painting. So I started in the 60s. I'm in the 80s now. And I don't know, man, I get too down a rabbit hole. So if you're sitting at work all day like me, chances are I probably listen to music most of that time. And even though I don't know, I know it from listening to it so much. I just tend to do that more. And the other thing too, is your kids get older. That's like it's a pretty strong current between all of us, where my kids really, you can tell my son now is starting to listen to like stuff I used to listen to in the 80s. And he's starting, he's starting to get this wide range. And so I need to do a better job like you too. So like if I were to tell you any podcast, the only one I listen to religiously, and I think part of it is because they're the same age as me, is Smartless. Like I
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
those guys, and
Yep.
they're just very relatable. So I'll listen to that
Yep.
one. And the only other one I'll listen to from time to time is the Kelsey brothers. You got to know Jason
Yep.
Kelsey's
Yeah,
got
they're
one.
great.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do a
Yeah.
nice job too. So,
They do a good
but
job.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
something I need to improve on too.
But
Same thing.
I'm exactly the same way. Like I'm just obsessed with music,
Yeah, me
and
too.
most times I am listening to music when I'm working out or in the office. And there's just so much to discover, new, old,
Yeah.
and like to that point, one of the greatest thing. My oldest is now almost 5, and she's really getting into some of the music that I like, and it's like one of those first activities and interests
Oh
that like
yeah.
we are really bonding over.
Oh yeah.
And like my greatest joy is when we get in the car on the drive to school, and I've got my 2-year-old screaming like, "I want Bluey, I want Sesame Street,"
Yeah.
and then my 5-year-old's like, "Dad, can you play, Chris Stapleton?"
Yeah.
Like even if it's like modern. So it's been really fun introducing her to things that I listen to, and then also her like she's obsessed with. I appreciate Chris Stapleton. He's not someone that I listen to regularly. She somehow heard a song,
Yeah.
and she's introduced me to some of his
Yeah,
music.
see, that's
So
the coolest, man. That's what my
it's
kids do
so
too.
fun.
And you'll see when your kids get older too. You'll go to shows of them. Like I remember now the first show I went to these guys with, and like I've been to so many different shows of my oldest daughter. And you'll see too later on in life, like if I were to talk to my oldest daughter Julia now, who's 26, and the song "Scar Tissue" comes on from Red Hot Chili Peppers, she remembers when I
Mhm.
played it in the car when she was the same age as your kids. And we were
Yeah,
driving her to school. Like they have certain moments where, like, I remember Dad played that song for me. So
totally.
that's the other
Yeah,
thing too. I don't know. Music's just this like great bridge. I can't explain it, and it's hard for me to pull away from. So like
it's
you, I listen to music all day. And while maybe I could be listening to podcasts and doing more, I don't know. I just get a lot more joy out of doing that, and that's what you
yeah,
need.
yeah, and it's fun now too. I haven't brought my 5-year-old to a concert yet. It's on my goal this year to find one, and there's so much good music here in Austin,
Oh,
as you
yeah.
know. But we obviously are conscious of screen time too, but it's one of those things like on YouTube where we'll pull up like performances and like watch.
Yeah.
Like last night we were watching. I totally forgot about this, but I was watching. Have you ever seen the video of it was the Kennedy Center induction for Led Zeppelin, and
Oh,
they were playing Stairway. It was a choir, and I forget the singer who was performing back. Like the guy like Robert Plant, they were all sitting watching, and it's one of the greatest renditions of Stairway to Heaven.
I'm going to look it up right after this.
And it happens to be obviously in their induction in this ceremony, and like they were getting emotional. But my daughter was just blown away because there's a giant choir, and they talk about drums, like the famous drum beat.
Yeah.
So we had a fun moment. And then today in the morning, she's like, "Daddy, can we listen to?" She called it like Zed Zeppelin.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
That's so awesome. I hope you never lose it. I'm so glad I never lost it. It's like the best thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, man. That's a great way to end. I knew this would be a great chat. I totally appreciate it. I had so much fun, learned a lot.
Likewise.
And so glad you're able to do it. Glad we turned it around quick. And,
man.
Obviously so glad you guys are a partner, and so glad we've had this relationship for so many years. So I really appreciate it, man.
Likewise.
Yeah.
There's going to be some more fun stuff that we can do together. And I really appreciate the time. We could go in a few different rabbit holes here. And we'll do that over our next beer personally.
Yeah. That'll be really fun.
On the drums and on some of the trail running.
Yes.
Training.
I missed you the other day, right? I missed you when I went with Richard. I'm sure you would have come along when he took me on that.
I was on my way up.
Jumping in Barton Springs. It was awesome. All right, man. Totally appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, bud. I'll see you.